value, and you can see you've got a variation on that. Post-scale size, again, is using a size value, and you've got the usual 2 again. And if you choose scale, you can see that this group gets grayed out, and now you've got the scale values to use instead. So these 2 groups are active depending on what option you have active up here. The size group, as you can see, has 2 values that we're working with. We've got a test value and we've got a variation value. As the value used to test against size rather than scale, the values tend to be smaller in this particular area, because generally the size of your particle is actually quite small. The reason why a particle would become large is generally because of a scale value, but the underlying actual size value is actually quite small. So you can see we're using a value here of 1.268, and if we actually go back to the original tetra, you can see the actual tetra size is 0.6. So let's actually go back down to scale test. Then you have a variation on this value, which obviously does what it does in most other operators in particle flow. This is an addition and a subtraction away from this value. So it actually creates a variance on either side of this value here. It'll create a variance, in other words, less than 1.268 and also more than 1.268, and using this value here. If we switch over to a scale test, you can see now you have 2 options here, which are the test value, which you can see is a percentage, and in this case the value used is to actually test against the scale, which is pretty obvious, and the values used here will tend to be much larger because they're percentages. So obviously you're going to be starting generally on 100% or 3000% or whatever, but obviously if you're testing for particles which have shrunk in size, then obviously you're going to be using quite small percentages. You know, you might be using 50%, 10%, 3%, whatever. And again, you have this variation value, and with the variation value obviously you can vary the percentage value as per usual. If you have any of these options keyed in any way, if any of these are animated, you then have the test value offset keying group, and with these you can actually choose your time reference to actually test those within. Are you going to be testing against absolute time? Are you going to be testing against particle age? Or are you going to be testing against event duration? Okay, so that's basically it for all the different parameters in the test. Let's quickly have a look at how those actually work in action. Okay, let's quickly look at how post-scale size works here. If we look at this value, you can see it's actually testing for a value of 1.28. We'll get rid of any variance. We'll actually try changing this value until we get our particles not to pop. If I actually play the simulation, you'll see what actually happens. Our particles go flying into the air, and you can see when they reach a certain scale, they get sent to a new test where gravity is put into place, and you can see they fall down to the ground plane. We've got collisions taking place here as well. That's why we've got a little bit of a sort of monster flow going on here. And you can also see the particles spawn. They leave little puffs of golden particles, and they fall down onto the ground plane. Now, if I increase this value, let's try putting it up so the particles actually... Yeah, they're always testing true at the moment. Let's actually increase that. Okay, let's try now. Okay, so you can see some of the particles are testing true, and the others are actually not testing true. They're flying onwards. So we'll just try increasing that a bit more. There we go, and you can see so, you know, you can see the particles here are sent down here. They're given a shape here, which is a tetra shape, which is 0.6. Then we split off 50% of the particles, which is using the split amount test, which we'll come to later. And they get sent into this event where there is a new shape operator which overrides the original one, and it assigns another tetra, but this time with a size of 1.1. Then we send out the particles back into this event, so now all our particles end up back in here, and 50% of the particles in here have a size of 1.1, and the other 50% have a size of 0.6. Then we do an age test of 19, and then we send our particles on to the next event. So if I just shrink this down slightly, now they're sent on frame 13 to the next event. So you can see they start off green, which is pretty much this event here. They immediately end up in this event. They start off as green, then on frame 13 they go to the next event, which is where you've got the scale test, and you can see they're actually then